So understanding inflation and why it is the silent robber. And it's so important to understand because this is the baseline as to why we invest in the first place and why we ended up along this crypto journey, right? So the synopsis. So what is inflation? So it's basically just an overall increase in the price of goods and services of X% this year. Then you need to earn at least X% more than last year to avoid becoming poorer and losing purchasing power in real terms. So there's plenty of ways inflation can happen, but I'm gonna give you 3 ways right now. So there's an inflation type called demand pull inflation. And that just means when demand increases, but the rate of production stays the same, then that equals less of the item to go around, so prices go up. Because if demand increases, more people want something that there's a limited supply of, and that production of that item stays the same, only naturally with those scales of supply and demand, will the demand make the price go up, right? So then we have cost push inflation. And that just means when demand stays the same, but production is affected by a shortage or a supply chain disruption or something like that. And that's what we've been seeing kind of with the microchips going on during this time in 2021, 2022. We saw a disruption in microchips, which led to a shortage of plenty of other things. So with the demand staying the same in that case, or rising, even worse rising, inflation would be crazy there. But if demand stays the same and production gets slashed, so then that would cost more money to produce that item, and then prices would naturally go up. Because remember, just that scale, supply and demand, they'll go up. And then we have the third one, monetary inflation. So demand and production costs stay the same, but the economy is booming and people are making more money. They're feeling good, they're feeling rich, they want to spend it. And when the money supply increases like that, and like we're seeing right now, but we're the furthest thing from a booming economy, when the money supply increases, people have more money to spend on the same item. So naturally prices go up to reflect that change. So demand and production, they stay the same, but more money's in the system. So more money chasing the same amount of goods and services, naturally prices got to rise to reflect that. So that is the 3 types of inflations we go over. So key takeaways. History makes the effect of inflation crystal clear. Today, each $1 buys you approximately 30 times less potatoes than it did 100 years ago, 20 times less coffee, and 24 times less bread, and so on. So inflation doesn't only affect prices of goods and services, it also affects wages, savings, debts, and interest rates. We need to factor in our savings and financial goals for inflation. So right now we saw that as of January 2022, inflation hit 7%, the first time since like 1980s. And that just means, all right, when we go to save our money or we're looking to reach those financial goals, get a house or get that car that we want or move somewhere that we want, we need to factor in that inflation rate. So 7%. If we want to reach anywhere of those goals and maintain our purchasing power and grow it, we need to make more than 7%. And it's hard to find 7% nowadays in traditional assets. That's why we're in crypto. So very key to understand that you need to factor in inflation in your savings and financial goals because there's so many more millionaires today than there were 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. That's because the money's devaluing. So more and more millionaires are popping up. And then we have more billionaires. I wouldn't be surprised to see a trillionaire soon by 2030 with how much money is going to be printed and has been printed already. So money put aside today will have less purchasing power in the future. So investing is the best way to combat inflation. You put money in the bank, right? We already showed you in the biggest scam of the history of mankind that when you put money into the bank, they just loan it back out to somebody else and they don't hold any 0% reserve requirements. Remember that. So when you put your money away and aside to the bank and you're thinking it's in safekeeping, it's really not. And that's what I used to think back in the day. I used to think, oh, you go to the money to the bank, they just hold it for you, they give you a little interest. I never knew what they did with it, but they're loaning it out to people at a higher interest rate than what they're giving to you on money that they don't even hold any of because it's a 0% reserve rate requirement. It's really crazy, this whole system. But that's why you're learning about it, so you're aware of it, and now you're able to tackle it and execute on a strategy to profit from it. So money put aside today will have less purchasing power in the future. Investing is the best way to combat this inflation. You could easily work more and make more money with your time. You're giving up your value time for that. You're working more hours to make more money, and you don't even have the time to spend it, right? And enjoy it. So by investing, making your money work for you while you're sleeping 24/7, around the clock, putting it in the right places, diversifying out, and being in markets like cryptocurrency that's so young but so promising with huge upside, this is exactly what you should be doing. And it's like perfect timing that you guys showed up here in Agartha and into the Stargate because we're at that moment where inflation's gonna rip roar. And cryptocurrencies, precious metals, specifically cryptocurrencies though, is that hedge against that. So game changer stuff we're learning. So the Federal Reserve usually seeks 2% inflation per year. But it's recently become loose, like I said, that number. And most recently recorded in January 2022 was 7%. Crazy, 7%. And you can see it reflected in the gas prices, the grocery store. You see the supply chain disruptions. You see that people are getting stimulus checks. So right now, if I were to compare, okay, what inflation do I think we're in right now? I would say we're in not a monetary inflation. Yes, there is more money in the system. The money supply is increasing, but the economy isn't booming. It's booming in the terms of the stock market growth and everything else like that. But the real economy, what's going on in the streets, in these businesses, people are suffering. So it's not monetary inflation because of a hyper booming economy. It's monetary inflation because they keep printing trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. And guys, check this out. Almost a fifth of all US dollars were created in the year of 2020. That was in October of 2020. Now it's January of 2022. I wonder how much of the money has been created within the past 2 years. I bet you it's way higher than almost a fifth now, especially after all the $1 trillion stimulus packages they keep passing and coming up with more of them, right? The Federal Reserve has printed unprecedented amounts of money to support the coronavirus-stricken economy. It has sparked debates about inflation. So data from the Fed shows that the broad measure of the stock of dollars, known as M2, rose from 15.34 trillion at the start of the year to 18.72 trillion in September. So the increase of 3.38 trillion equates to 18% of the total supply of dollars, and it means almost $1 in $5 was created in 2020. That statistic is sick. But M2 includes physical notes and coins, banks' reserves held at the Fed, accounts at banks, and money market mutual funds. So a narrow measure of money known as the monetary base, or M0, which is physical money and bank reserves at the Fed, rose from 3.44 trillion in January to 4.8 trillion in August, the latest available figures, and that's a 28% jump. A 28% jump in the amount of physical money and bank reserves at the Fed. Crazy. So the Fed pumps more than $3 trillion into the economy. The huge growth in the stock of dollars reflects the massive interventions in the economy by the Fed, because we know they want to intervene and they want to print money because they want to be the lender and buyer of last resort. That's what we learned in the biggest scam of the history of mankind. So the Fed is in control of the US money supply. In the spring, as markets crashed and normal life was paused, it pumped around $3 trillion in the market. Although it is often described as printing money, the Fed in practice creates digital dollars to buy up government bonds, which are those glorified IOUs, right? And other securities in the secondary market. The policy known as quantitative easing, QE, aims to flood the market with cash to keep borrowing cheap. They want you to keep borrowing, they're going to keep borrowing, they're just going to keep doing it until the bubble pops. And banks also create money when they lend. And most money in the economy is created this way. Only about $2 trillion are in circulation as physical currency.
If you're new to crypto, or if you've been in crypto for a while and you still don't feel like you have a strategy, then we have the perfect thing for you. Because it's one thing to have a strategy, but it's another thing to automate that strategy. So what we're doing right now is a waterfall flash sale. This is the start of week 1. We just launched our Stargate automated experience, which gives you access to utilize our custom automatic trading bots that we built for XRP, XLM, HBAR, Algorand, and a bunch of other altcoins. If you're sick and tired of watching the charts every single day, worrying, stressing, guessing about prices, and if it's going to go up or down, then look no further than this, because this is the holy grail for any crypto holder or trader.
So what the Federal Reserve did is no way unique. Senior economist at CME Group, he said the Bank of England, the ECB, and others created money at a similar rate. So we dive into that later on in your missions of Agartha, but we're the world reserve currency. So when we print, it has damaging effects to the rest of the world. So will the dollar supply surge make prices jump? So the Fed's unprecedented actions have sparked a debate about whether the surge in dollars will lead to inflation. This was back in October 2020. Now you're looking at articles 2022. All they talk about is inflation. You can't get it away from the TV. So see, by looking at this stuff and reading through the BS basically about how, it could spark a debate. No, we know what inflation is now. And we know that when more money is put into the system, chasing the same amount of goods and services, inflation is bound to happen. Many economists are skeptical. Andrew Hunter, senior U.S. economist at Capital Economics, said the relationship between the money supply and inflation has in reality been pretty weak or arguably non-existent for a few decades now. Norland said it could be argued that there has been inflation in other parts of the economy. He pointed to booming prices in stocks, bonds, commodities such as gold and silver, the USP 500 stock index, for example, hitting a record high in August before falling back slightly. So let's talk about that for a sec, because just like toilet paper or just like paper towels or just like anything else at the grocery store that's limited in supply or has a set supply, right? Stocks have a limited supply or a set supply. They can always do a stock split or a reverse stock split and mess with that. But stocks, so there's a set amount of shares within a company, equity, that if more money's getting flooded into the system and there's that only amount of Apple stock, Tesla stock, well, asset prices are bound to rise like that. So I don't know what he was arguing here, because he pointed to booming prices in stocks, bonds, commodities such as gold and silver. If gold and silver are booming, usually that would probably signal that the US dollar is going down. Same with stocks and bonds most of the times. Fed's government bond purchases have led some to accuse the bank of funding the huge amounts of government spending. They say this erodes the Fed's independence. But the Fed, like central banks around the world, has been unapologetic. Facts. Chair Jay Powell last month pledged economic support for as long as it takes. There wasn't even a timeline. They're just going to do it for as long as it takes. So Norland said he expected the Fed to create more dollars at some point via QE. He said the bank could expand the money supply on and off for a while like it did after the 2008 financial crisis. So There's going to be volatility with all this Fed talk. The Federal Reserve is definitely a government agency to watch out for when you're dealing with investing, macroeconomics, cryptocurrency, stocks, bonds, commodities, anything when it comes to financial markets and money. So this is a cool image from visualcapitalist.com. And this is the purchasing power of the US dollar over time. And I'm going to bookmark this website because there's another thing that I show you guys from this. And this is a good website to keep an eye on and get history stuff for it. Purchasing power of the US dollar over time. So a dollar's worth. Purchasing power of the US dollar. The purchasing power of the US dollar has fallen sharply over the last century due to rising inflation and money supply. It's only natural. So the Federal Reserve Act creates a central bank with the ability to manage the country's money supply. This happened around, what was the date? Like 1900 or 1910 should be said. And that's when, say, a dollar was worth, in comparison to 2020, worth $25. So the same dollar that we had in 2020, if you kind of took that dollar back in time and you were in those times, you'd be able to buy $25 worth of stuff. And then by 1930, the stock market crashes in the lead up to the Great Depression. Then we have US President Roosevelt criminalizes the possession of gold. I wonder why he wouldn't want the general public to own gold when the US dollar and the stock market's crashing down. It seems like they don't have our best interests in heart. So the Bretton Woods Agreement establishes the gold standard right after and the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. And then we have the gold standard is abandoned and currencies are no longer linked to gold, so they're backed by nothing. So that's when in 2009, the Fed started to begin doing quantitative easing in response to the financial crisis. And then the US money supply grew by $3.8 trillion in 2020, equal to 20% of all dollars ever created. And you can just see the purchasing power of that dollar eroding. That looks like it's in a bear market, right? And you're gonna learn that in Atlantis, but we see lower lows, lower highs, lower lows, lower highs. This dollar is crumbling into bits and pieces right now. And you can see the long-term macro direction of the dollar. And I can't wait to then go over the macro long-term direction of cryptocurrencies when we get into it, because you see the dollar's purchasing power is going down for the long term. And this is over a span of 100 years. And then we see in the past 10 years, cryptocurrencies is just on a macro bull market going higher, 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 with dips and flows in between, of course. But the comparison is very good to see. So what is purchasing power? The purchasing power of currency is the amount of good or services that can be bought with 1 unit of that currency. So for example, $1 US could buy 10 bottles of beer in 1933. Today, that's the cost of a small cup of coffee at McDonald's. In other words, the purchasing power of the dollar and value in terms of what it can buy has increased over time as price levels have risen. So that's the secret silent robbing to it. And everything else that you use money for to get is going up in price. But the dollar looks the same, right? So that's how they silently rob you of your wealth and purchasing power. So at the rate we're going and we keep this pace of money printing, we're gonna see massive bubbles in inflation like no other. That's why understanding inflation, the effects that it can have on your purchasing power and your wealth is so necessary going over into these next couple years, 2025 to 2030. Securing your life and your kids' life and your kids' life and anybody that you care about and love. And you obviously want that time back. You wanna use those dollars, those stored energy is what we learned about in the history of money. That stored energy is to be used to make you happy, make you content, spend that on your passions, going on a trip. It's not to be left in a bank, rotting away secretly by a system that was set up for us to fail. It's used to make it grow, make it work for us 24/7 while we're sleeping in a nice place that we feel comfortable. So by planting those seeds in the future, we then can enjoy all the good times, all the freedom, and all the opportunity that comes along with gaining that money and growing our money while we sleep 24/7. So that is why inflation is so important to understand, and that's what it is. In the next video, we're gonna go over the Bretton Woods system, and I'll see you there.
Are you sick and tired of just stressing and guessing, holding and hoping, and watching the crypto market go through its ups and downs and not doing anything about it? If you're someone in that position, then look no further than the Stargate automated experience. We just launched it and we built custom automated trading bots for XRP, XLM, HBAR, and a bunch of other utility coins. If that sounds of interest to you and you want to learn more, click the video below and I'll see you over there.